webinar about, well, policy and trends and maybe some opportunities in China in general and in the life science market in particular. So we will start with a presentation by Björn Cappelin from the National Center on China. And then we will have Judy and Joachim from Business Sweden in Beijing talk more specifically about the life science market and opportunities and policy trends and so on. So I think I don't need to go through the agenda, and you will present yourselves. So I'll just hand over to you, Björn.
Thank you very much, Anna. I've prepared a presentation. Do you know how, is it possible for me to upload it?
Is it? I think it's better. I mean, you could probably email it to me if you want me to show it from my computer, or otherwise you can just present from your computer.
That's what I'm trying to do here.
Okay, and then you see there's this little box with an arrow.
Let's see.
Share the
if we're.
Yeah.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Excellent. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for this opportunity to make say a few words about the current state of the Chinese economy and some key trends. I hope this will serve as a sort of overflight of the matter, and that our friends from Business Sweden will be able to take you deeper into the Chinese health market, which is certainly not an area of my expertise. I'd like to let's see. I'd like to take this opportunity first to just say a few short words about the Swedish National China Center. The center started in 2021. It is a functionally independent organization funded by the Swedish government. Our mission is to provide a research-based, policy-relevant analysis and advice to Swedish stakeholders regarding China and how China affects Swedish interests in various ways. And my own background is in the government. I worked for a long time in the government offices, including on China-related matters in the Ministry of Enterprise and Innovation, Näringsdepartementet in Swedish. And I've been with the China Center since November of last year. If we start by placing China's economy in a sort of global international economic context, China is on its way to becoming the world's largest economy. In 2017, China surpassed the US in terms of GDP adjusted for purchasing power parity. And nominally, the US economy is still larger, but analysts estimate that China will surpass the US in 2030. So you can see from this curve. So we're talking about a strong upward trajectory over the long term. China is also the world's largest trading nation. It is the world's top exporter and the world's second largest importer. For over 140 countries called China their #1 trading partner. And since 2020, China is the largest trading partner of the EU, beating the US with about a percentage point. And China is Sweden's largest trading partner in Asia, and our #8 trading partner globally, if you look at trade in goods. In 2019, the Swedish commodity export to China was the export in goods was worth about 71 billion Swedish kroner, and our imports from China about 91 billion kroner. If we look at some trends or the growth over time of the Chinese GDP, we've seen about 10 years ago, the strong upward GDP growth trajectory started decreasing somewhat, was slowing down. In 2020, as you can see on the slide, there was something of a dip, obviously, because of the impact of the pandemic. But on the other hand, a very large increase in 2021 as a consequence of government stimulus. The GDP growth target that has been announced for this year is 5.5%, which is down from last year's target of 6%. It is the lowest GDP growth forecast number since 1991, but it's still a lot higher than many independent economic assessments of the Chinese economy. So it's a matter of also from the political perspective, managing expectations, if you will, on a growth that is slowing down. And if we look at some of the current events that are affecting the economy in China, obviously we have to talk about the current flare-ups or outbreaks of the pandemic. Out of the top 100 cities in China measured by their contribution to GDP, there are only 13 cities that don't have some form of pandemic-related restriction in terms of lockdown of some sort at the moment. This means that about 200 million Chinese citizens are currently in some form of lockdown. And these flare-ups have hit Hong Kong and Shanghai, that are obviously financial and trading hubs, very hard. And this will impact the economy in one way or another. According to some estimates, if these lockdowns continue for 1 month in Shanghai, that means GDP growth will be halved for that month. And on a national scale, that would mean something like minus 0.2 or 0.3%. Obviously, logistics are also affected. The port of Shanghai is the largest port not only in China, but I believe in the world. And volumes there have decreased by almost 40% week on week. So obviously, it is not surprising that both local and national authorities are scrambling to do their utmost to get this outbreak under control and to minimize the effects that it has on the economy. If we look at some of the main challenges for the Chinese economy moving ahead, one such challenge is generally a lower demand among both consumers and investors. We've seen numbers in the real estate sector that show this trend very clearly. There are supply side shortages. There are prices on international commodities that climb, and there are also restrictions on access to capital in China. And obviously, a more sort of a factor that is somewhat beyond the sphere of economics is the impact of what is happening with the war in Ukraine, balancing consequences on short and long term. An upside for China from the fallout of what is happening in the Ukraine is that, from an economic perspective, obviously, that there might be lower prices on some of the commodities that Russia is exporting to China, such as oil, gas, and even some foodstuffs, and perhaps an acceptance from Russia for higher prices on Chinese exports. A downside, obviously, is sanctions imposed on Russia that may impact Chinese companies that trade with Russia. Also, internationally, commodity prices are rising, and there have been talks of threats to the stability of the food supply. And obviously, the commercial relationship with the West is still of great importance to China. Russia constitutes only about 2% of China's foreign trade, and North America and Europe together are from a strictly economical viewpoint, about 12 times more important economically for China. That obviously doesn't say anything about how the political calculus affects this situation. And if we look at the political landscape and how that affects China's economy, it has become more and more clear over the last few years that under the current administration of President Xi Jinping, politics always tend to trump economy. There are strong signals that market forces and private enterprise need to increasingly align with political priorities. This includes self-sufficiency, which is a very important political priority for the Chinese leadership, and that has an impact on companies and industries. And I believe this is relevant also in the healthcare sector. And I believe that Judy and Joachim will talk more about that later. I also wanted to sort of end on talking a bit about a phrase that some of you may have heard, which is common prosperity, which is a sort of political catchphrase that is very closely associated with President Xi. And I think it also sort of symbolizes this need for the economy to align with political priorities. It was launched in last year, and it sort of zooms in on a perception of growing inequality in Chinese society, and that this is a major political issue that should not be permitted to worsen further. The term was written into the 5-year plan, and it's been highlighted in major political speeches and constantly promoted in state media. And there was a lot of expectations, at least outside of China and for people watching Chinese politics, that it could be one of the key concepts that would sort of be taken forward into the planned third term for President Xi that will begin sometime later this year. There are, however, signals that this concept is perhaps not as hot as it was last year, and it has almost completely vanished from the official policy agenda for 2022. And there was a lot of perception that this perhaps was another avenue for restricting what the government perceives as the excesses of uncontrolled capitalism, if you will. Because there have been other signals that in some sectors of the economy that reining in of enterprise activity, especially in the digital sector. And I think it's worth keeping an eye on this particular strand of policymaking in the future, and how it balances with other key messages about the continued importance of market forces to the economy. I realize that I'm ending on something of a sort of negative note, or talking about challenges and political control over the economy, but I think that if we look back at the beginning, the first graphs that I showed, this is the long-term trend is strongly upward, I would say, in the Chinese economy. And so what we're looking at is perhaps a slowdown in what has been over the last 10 to 20 years globally unrivaled economic growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Björn. Do we have any immediate questions to Björn about the economy in general? Okay, we will have a Q&A session at the end, so if you think of something, you'll have the opportunity at that time as well. So then I think we will go over to Joachim and Judy.
Thank you very much, Anna, and thank you, Björn, for a very good flyover and backdrop to the economy and the situation. And I hope you're seeing the slides loading as we speak. being here on the ground. My name is Björn Cappelin. I am heading up Business Sweden over here in Greater China, with offices in Beijing, Shanghai, Taipei, and Hong Kong, and the Trade Commissioner of Sweden to China. I am sitting in Beijing, so I'm free to move. I was about to say, while many of our colleagues are obviously right now, as Björn pointed out, being stuck in their homes because of the lockdowns that are happening. So it's not only in the macro figures that there's of course a number of question marks, but also on a day-to-day basis, both for colleagues but also for companies. So we are also watching very closely now what the March figures told us something about where things are heading. Of course, April will probably be even more influenced by the situation. Lot of goods flows are going in and out of the Shanghai area, and if people can't work, if the port is not operating fully, if warehouses are not open, etc., that is having a trickle-down effect on many of the company's value chains. So retail sales already been going down a bit. The purchasing manager index showing a bit decline, and we are as we speak, we just sent out a survey to all Swedish companies operating in the market yesterday, asking them about right here and now, how are you impacted? So that's something we will have response to towards the end of this week. That's just to be aware of, and that will be published as soon as it is available. It's always good to see the real situation and also what kind of measures are they taking. So with those words, Julie, we can see your desktop, but we cannot see your.
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with it. I think I was uploading.
We saw it before, but then it disappeared.
Okay. Now
Yes.
it comes back, right? Yes.
Fantastic. On the life science side, it is still a big, both in terms of the trade between Sweden and China, life science and healthcare products is a rather substantial amount, but also out of the 600 Swedish companies that actually have subsidiaries in mainland China, healthcare is also a rather important area. So Sweden has a lot of experience around the Chinese life science market, so key to call out. And if now looking at what the market looks like, we'll do a quick overall flyover and then deep dive into a few areas that are relevant for hopefully for those of you attending the meeting right now. So Healthy China 2030, Julie, get the blueprint up. And I think this is a key backdrop to see that there is an overall plan often referred to as Healthy China 2030. It was something that the President Xi Jinping announced, now it's 6 years ago, in 2016, where a number of areas were defined as critical to be strong in. We will touch upon some of them today. Unfortunately, we don't have time to run through all of them, but for example, elderly care, but also maternal and fertility care. But all these components have clear plans. They have plans on an overall blueprint level, we should say. But then there's also to the right a number of healthcare reforms that are important for China to put in place to ensure health is there for everyone, basically. And some of these key areas have really been to drive the social health insurance and making it accessible for everyone, reforming public hospitals, but also ensuring on a county level, it's not only in the big cities, but also out further away from tier 1 and 2 cities, there should also be access to healthcare. And one area that Judy will touch upon a bit today as well has been the focus on essential medicine, and saying that there should be a secured basic need for prevention and treatment, and there should be a quality and cost insurance of the essential medicine, which has led to a rather controlled plan now on volume-based procurement, where both national but also provincial and further down, it is stipulated how you are buying or how China is actually buying certain drugs, but also equipment in order to get the costs down. And that can, of course, be very tempting to tap into, but it can also be a big risk because obviously with volume-based procurement, margins go down. And it's not fun to sell a lot if you have a negative margin on each piece. So these are some of the areas to be aware of. But before going into that, let's just quickly look at what is happening in China right now in terms of people. And I think many of you are aware of these macro trends as well, but less babies are born. China went from a one-child policy to a two-child policy, now to a three-child policy, but it's not really triggering a lot of children. We have the lowest fertility rate here for a long period of time. And we also see less weddings, less willingness to marry, higher divorce rates. So a lot of issues in terms of the family building that of course the government is trying to stimulate because juniors are needed. And we see the other side here that more people are getting old, and we have the challenge of a large proportion is over 65 years old, and retirement ages have been rather early in China, especially if you work in the public sector. And that's, of course, something that is looked into now as well, how to deal with that moving forward. But, of course, also how to take care of the older people. You see some of the policies in the bottom there. I mentioned 3 kids policy. There's also a lot of focus now on maternity leaves and encouraging people to get pregnant, because then they can also get a bit more leave. There's a crackdown on private tutoring, which is also a result of this, because it has been too expensive to have a child because of all the private schooling. And so no one can afford more than 1 child because they put all the money on that child. Now they try to solve that by making schooling a bit more affordable. A little bit back to the common prosperity that Björn touched upon as well. Postponing retirement age, and also interesting enough, but compulsory calming down period before you can get a full divorce, to try to encourage people to stick together longer, with the assumption that that leads to more babies. Yes, and how does that impact companies? Well, on the shrinking workforce, which is becoming obvious when people get old and less babies are born, we do see a lot of forecasts now that the working age population will be half or less than half in a rather near future. This is already, right now, all Swedish companies say they have a challenge with hiring. The talent pool is shrinking. Economy is growing and everyone needs more good employees, but the availability is lower. So salaries are hiking. It's also harder to recruit. That was raised as the #1 challenge by Team Sweden's business climate survey last year and previous year. And the next one we're doing together with the Chamber of Commerce right now. And we will probably see similar patterns there. Of course, there are also opportunities for automation and Swedish technology helping out with the challenge. On new consumer groups, very important in this field, we have the silver economy, a lot of focus on elderly care, and Judy will raise some concrete examples of how Swedish healthcare companies have tapped into this trend. We also see on the consumer side the singles or the DINKs, the double income, no kids population that have quite a lot of money to spend. So we're also seeing quite high consumption trends popping up, even though retail sales were now plummeting a bit in March, but overall consumers spend quite a lot. But yes, that was just to set the stage. A lot has happened in China since I lived here last time, but also over the last couple of years, which is really impacting demand for healthcare products. So over to you, Judy.
Yes, I'll take it over. Yes, as Joachim mentioned, China is getting old. In China, we're saying the country is getting old before it's getting rich. If you look at this graph data on this page, we see that China has an aging population up to 30.5%. It's very close to the aging society standard, which is 14%. And we also see we're lacking manpower that age between 15 to 59. And compared with year 2010, there's a big decrease of roughly 6.8%. And the birth rate is pretty high, is pretty low. In 2021, the birth rate was the lowest level in the last 20 years. And what this means, and all this, I must say, have really given pressure to the medical insurance fund. If you look at the National Medical Insurance Fund over the past of years, in general speaking, from the national level, we see the income is larger than expenditure. But if we zoom in into provinces or cities, we notice that a number of provinces and cities are really struggling with this medical insurance fund. And for instance, many cities we know have stopped buying competence enhancement equipment for medical professionals. And such procurement was 100% from the government budget. In other words, not only the medical insurance fund facing a pressure, also the health budget nationwide. To address the issue in the latest 14th Five-Year Plan, the government had issued a number of policies to improve the imbalance. And in today's meeting, we'll highlight two of them, which is relevant to Swedish companies and relevant to all companies, I would say, in the medical sector. One policy we would like to zoom in a bit is about the dynamic adjustment of medical insurance catalog for drugs. Another one is volume-based procurement. If we start with this medical insurance drug list, the drug list as of today, in principle, is adjusted on a yearly basis. And the process of making this adjustment is 6 months. And for the medical insurance authorities, they are having concrete working plan in the 6 months for the purpose to pick up the most relevant and qualified drugs to be included in the medical insurance drug list. And for pharmaceutical companies, our suggestion is that they should plan their work according to the timeline of the health department. For instance, they need to do homework for the document preparation. They need to communicate with experts to make strategy and also to adjust the strategy according to the actual situation and highly engaged in negotiations and eventually to be able to be listed in this national medical drug list. I would say this list is more relevant to innovative drugs rather than generic drugs, because for innovative drugs, it's very important for them to be listed in this national insurance drug list in order to increase the market share and increase the sales. So in conclusion, for companies with innovative drugs, it's very important for them to monitor the process of this list adjustment and plan their work accordingly. Another policy we would like to touch upon today is this volume-based procurement. I would say the volume-based procurement has drawn very large attention since it's introduced in the year 2018 because it has a large impact for all drug companies. And now, since it's introduced in 2018, I would say now it becomes a new normal. And this volume-based procurement the purpose is to achieve a lower price through large volume procurement by the government. And volume-based procurement as of today is stated as a national strategy in the 14th Five-Year Plan, as well as in the long-term vision till year 2035. So this is a very important policy to all companies who want to participate in this, who produce generic drugs and want to sell in the Chinese market. On this page, we give an overall picture of the national procurement in the last couple of years since 2018. As you can see that from procurement number 1 to national procurement number 6, a number of more than 200 diversities were involved in this volume-based procurement. And 30% of the total drug procurement value of public medical institutions were covered by this national procurement, and the price cut on average is 35%. It's 53%, not 35, it's 53%. And if you look at the proportion of foreign companies who are winning this volume-based procurement, we see in the first round is 13%, and in the very recent round in 2021 is 36%. And I would like to highlight that the proportion here refers to the number of foreign companies divided by the total number of companies in the volume-based procurement, and is not related with the value or the drug or the type of drugs. And on this page, we also give examples of foreign companies who have won this volume-based procurement from national level. As you can see that AstraZeneca was selected as a supplier in the first round in 2018. And this national procurement is valid for 1 or 2 years. And after expired, the government will start a new round of volume-based procurement on national level. As mentioned earlier, this volume-based procurement has become national strategy and becomes a common practice. As of today, this volume-based procurement has formed a very clear mechanism, and normally it could procured in 3 administrative levels, namely national level, provincial level, and city level. And for national level procurement, is mainly focused on drugs for chronic disease or common diseases. And the procurement is applicable to original drugs with expired patent or generic drugs that has passed the generic drug consistency evaluation. And I got to mention that the average time span for this generic drug consistency evaluation in China is 204 days. Besides the national level procurement, there's also provincial level procurement, also procurement based on volume. And for this provincial level procurement can be conducted by a standalone province or by a consortium composing of different provinces and regions. For instance, very recently, 8 provinces and 2 regions formed an alliance for volume procurement, and they announced the procurement of 26 varieties of drugs. And for provincial level procurement, they can only procure drugs that are not included in the national list. And on top of the national procurement and provincial procurement, we also have city level procurement, which means that cities can also add new drugs into their procurement list based on this volume-based procurement. I would like to highlight that this volume-based procurement is not only for drugs, but also applicable to consumables as well as large equipment. And according to the national plan, by the end of 2022, for each province, they should have volume-based procurement for at least 350 varieties of drugs and 5 types of high-value consumables. As mentioned, this volume-based procurement is a new normal today, and the companies really have to find the right strategy to cope with it. And talking about this volume-based procurement, apparently it helps companies to improve the market share if they are selected as a vendor. But however, we see there is a large price cut. As mentioned before, the average price cut for the round 1 to round 6 is 53%. So company really needs to find the balance between the increased market share and the reduced margin to decide if they want to be engaged in this volume-based procurement. We also heard different voices about this. For instance, one expert we know mentioned they feel this procurement or this program is not good for the sustainable development of the pharmaceutical industry, because the pharmaceutical industry, the companies, are really spending a lot on new drugs, and R&D spending is supported by this company profit. But with current program, the companies are losing profit heavily, so this can hardly support their further R&D activities. So let's see. However, we can see that China government has very much determined on this volume-based procurement, and has decided it as a national strategy to perform. So in conclusion, for companies with innovative drugs, we suggest them to really monitor the development of the adjustment of the medical insurance drug list. And for generic suppliers and for medical device suppliers, as well as for suppliers in consumables, it's very important for the companies really to monitor the development of this volume-based procurement and also make the strategy adjustment accordingly. Yes, after this, after overview of this volume-based procurement, I would like to change my topic to elderly care. As Joachim mentioned, we have seen more and more older people in China today, and according to message delivered by President Xi Jinping, he really wants to improve the elderly care in China and want the elderly to enjoy a happy old age and share the fruits of reform and development. And in China, to respect the elderly has been a traditional virtue. And as of today, with statement from President Xi, we see a number of policies released to support elderly care. And today, I would like to mention two of them. And the first one I would like to mention is the 45-year plan for the national aging development and elderly care services. And in this plan, it gives some quantified target. For instance, the total number of beds for elderly care services shall increase from 8.2 million to 9 million within 5 years from 2020 to 2022. And the long-term care insurance should be further improved. Talking about these long-term care insurances, we actually started pilot a couple of years ago. This is mainly to cover the nursing services at institutions or at home for the elderly. As of today, there are 49 pilot cities and 140 million has been covered by this long-term care insurance nationwide. And the Beijing city is pretty aggressive in this, in implementing this policy. However, as we see of today, this long-term care insurance is mainly to subsidize nursing services at institutions or at homes. And we really want to see this subsidy could be further extended, for instance, to the procurement of relevant devices or equipment. Another policy supporting this elderly care is called 14th Five-Year Plan for Healthy Age. And in this particular plan, we see a number of action plans. It covers, for instance, this public education, for instance, covers provincial healthcare, covers Chinese medicine for the elderly, and encourage the elderly care in hospital, in health institutions, as well as it encourage competence enhancement program for elderly care professionals. So in conclusion, we see a number of overarching policies has been released recently to support the elderly care industry and what it means for the companies. Here we have example from Bellman. Bellman selling this hearing aid for the elderly. They have been entered the Chinese market for a couple of years. And in China, as you know, that a lot of activities are carried out in a top-down approach. When the overarching policy is made, authorities and departments will act in a very timely manner. And for Bellman in particular, they work a lot with Disabled Persons Federation as well as Civil Affairs Department. The Civil Affairs Department is government authority to give subsidy to the elderly people above a certain age. And the Disabled Persons Social Federation is an authority to subsidize the peoples who have this disability certificate. For Bellman, besides selling to individuals, they also work a lot with Disabled Persons Federation in different regions, as well as Civil Affairs Department, and also engage in this government procurement. According to our interviews, they are very pleased with current legislation environment and the different policies supporting healthcare. They believe the current environment is really friendly to their business development as well as business growth. Besides, the country is getting old, as Joachim mentioned, we are lacking of new babies. So in China, as today, we see there's a trend that assistive reproductive technologies is expected to be included in the health insurance system. On this slide, you can see that market size of assisted reproductive services in China is expected to be doubled in 5 years' time. And we also see more and more facilities or clinics are licensed for these services over the years. And Beijing is the very first city announced in February that 16 types of technologies for assisted reproduction will be included in the Beijing's medical insurance system. But unfortunately, latest news is that this action is on hold. And a wild guess that there is a shortage in this medical insurance fund. That's why this implementation is being postponed. Besides Beijing, we also see other provinces like Shandong, like Hunan, like Sichuan. They all claim that they are exploring the possibilities of including these technologies into their reimbursement system. And for companies in this sector, it's really worth monitor the policy development. And if these services is included in the medical reimbursement system, it's definitely a good news for all companies in this sector. Yeah, that's my presentation. So I'll go back to Joachim to continue with some activities we have in the Chinese market.
Thank you. And just to ending up on a practical note, because of course many of you are thinking of, some of you might be dealing with China, but many might be thinking, how can you actually at least understand the market a bit better? And then it's worth highlighting a platform that is a part of Nordic Innovation. Nordic Innovation is under the Nordic Council of Ministers, helping Nordic companies in the Nordics, but also around the world. And we are running a program called Nordic Healthy Cities together with our dear 4 Nordic neighbors. SweCare is a strategic partner in this whole collaboration, and there are around 80 companies involved across the Nordic countries already. And you can see on the map to the right, this is how this program is working since the China is so big. Each country has selected a target city or a partner city in China with whom we collaborate in terms of discussing with local health commissions, what are the particular needs, what are the opportunities for Nordic firms. And then we arrange activities together to do overall discussions, but also down to concrete matchmaking. And Sweden has Wuhan in Hubei province as the partner city. That does not mean that Swedish companies cannot join the others. That's the whole purpose. All Nordic companies can be involved in all of the cities and activities. And you can see on the next slide an example of what has been done to date. There's been activities in Chongqing and Shanghai, and actually last week in Beijing, I had a great pleasure together with Judy to be at the Norwegian embassy and have Anna and SweCare on the link in terms of a hybrid event. And we also had Perimed and Olink from Sweden being there and presenting, one on site and one virtually. Even if you are in China these days, it's sometimes hard to attend all events due to lockdowns and travel restrictions. But this is just to say, you can see a number of Swedish companies who have been actively involved to present their solutions in these events, but of course even more as listening and understanding what's happening. And yesterday and today, that's why my mouth is so dry, we've been having basically back-to-back meetings with Wuhan to plan for the Sweden activities there during the spring. We were supposed to go there as a large delegation this week. That was cancelled in last minute because of the travel situation. But we managed to have a virtual delegation of all Nordic countries together, both with Foreign Affairs Office, with the Health Commission, and with the Department of Commerce to really discuss through what are their interests, what do they need in order to build the healthcare system locally. And many of them understand Sweden very well. It was a great pleasure to speak to the director of the Foreign Affairs Office, who had been working at Uppsala within the medical field before, so the clear link between Sweden and Wuhan. So there's a great appreciation already there and an understanding of what Nordic health can offer. But here you can see some initial topics that were agreed upon in terms of areas of interest and that will now be explored further. So elderly care rehabilitation, the whole medical data and how to use data, patient journals, etc., and also mental health side. So we will now over the coming days and weeks be shaping these events that are about to happen, preferably before summer, on site, and of course with the virtual elements as well, both to discuss the plans and understand better and how we can work together, but also give Swedish companies the opportunity to chip in and talk about what they are doing. And we've seen in these events, it's been both companies who are on the ground, who have an infrastructure, who are selling, but it's also been a number of Nordic companies who have nothing in China, but who are just curious to test some of their thoughts. So do reach out to Anna if you're interested in this, or to us if you have any questions about how it works. We'll of course be extremely happy to discuss and see if it makes sense for you. That brings us to the end, right, Judy? Now we've talked about everything from high-level policies to details. Yeah, there you see our Business Sweden. We don't need to see, but we can see our names at least, and contact information should you have any immediate questions. But I also know, Anna, that the floor is open for questions. Not seen so many coming into the chat, but there might be people still sitting with questions that they want to raise. Thank you very much for your attention so far.
Yeah, and thank you, Joachim and Judy. Very good and comprehensive presentation. Of course, there are so many details in this big country, but at least we now have dived a little bit deeper into some of the topics. And yeah, please prepare questions if you haven't already. If no one raises their hands just now, I have a few, well, just a little bit of follow-up on the volume-based procurement. So what do you think is really the, I mean, the impact of participating in this for a Swedish company? What should they consider and so on? And it's also in terms of the competition with the domestic suppliers.
Yes. With regards to this volume-based procurement, as I mentioned before, talking about drugs is more about generics and drugs that has expired its patent. So for Swedish companies or foreign companies, they are allowed to participate in this program, but I would say it's more like companies' homework to really balance the increased potential market share and how much the price cut they can afford. And we know that some companies are active in this, particular large ones with a large variety of products. But some companies, we know, they are giving up this market because of the overall size not that big, and the price cut is beyond their reach. So for instance, some companies give up this market and focus on private hospitals or retail channels. Of course, if you have LTC products to offer, you can more focus on retail channels than the prescribed drugs. So I would say it's more like a company's initiative companies' evaluation or assessment before they can really step in. But as I mentioned, this is a kind of national strategy, is something that companies have to face, not only for drug companies, but also for companies supplying high-end consumables. For instance, the government has highlighted a number of products like dental implants as a next step for volume-based procurement. So this is policy that affects everyone in the sector. It's really worth paying attention to this. Yeah.
And also a little bit about the digital solutions. Is that something? I know there is a rapid expansion of using data and digital or tech solutions in healthcare. And what do you see in this area? What will the development be, and what is the national competition also?
Well, in China, for this online consultation is kind of, if we focus on online consultation, that's related, that's part of digital solutions, I would say. Online consultation is a licensed business. It has to be based on a concrete hospital. We have internet hospital, which is based on a physical hospital, or the hospital have to use a third-party platform to provide services to the patients for online consultation. I would say this is a growing market, particularly boosted by this pandemic. When people are locked down, cannot go to see doctors in person. But for the long-term development, we have to see what happens after the pandemic, because many patients still prefer to go to see doctors in person, which make them feel more rest assured. But talking about the digital health, I would say the general trend, it will be growing. But however, for companies, we need to pay attention to on the data security, because now Chinese government has issued a number of regulations to regulate data, like private data, like medical data, and also have very strict regulations for data restricted to generic resources. So in conclusion, it's growing market, but really needs to depend on which area that you focus on and what solutions you provide to the Chinese market. For instance, we believe the wearable devices, we see a trend, growing trend, but if you are highly engaged in generic resources related solutions, it might be a kind of area that really need to pay attention to.
Okay, and do you think because I mean there was a lot of prevention of chronic diseases, COPD and cardiovascular and diabetes and so on, cancer. So do you think there will also be, I mean, in terms of wellness and health apps, but also in monitoring and follow-up of people who are already chronic patients? Is that also, do you think, a prospective market, or will there still be a wish from the patients to see their doctor instead of being monitored digitally?
I would say most people having this chronic disease like cancer are aged people. They are not grow up in this digital world.
Okay.
So many of them are still preferring to see the doctors in person, like my mom, who is 80 years old. She's not really digitalized. But I believe there's a trend. More and more people will go through online systems to see the online platform to see the doctor. For instance, in Beijing, many hospitals offer this internet hospital. Like, for instance, in the Beijing, I think called United or Union Hospital, one of the best hospital in China, they offer this internet hospital services to their chronic disease patients. And the patients can see their doctor online or through their platform. This really brings a lot of conveniences to the patients and also avoid lots of crowds in the hospitals, particularly in the pandemic period. And many people are getting more and more used to this because of the conveniences they enjoyed through using these platforms. So I think in the long-term perspective, it'll be more and more online. And when we're talking about this chronic disease management, our friends in Denmark are very eager to share their experiences in this digital patient record. And this is also promoted in China as well. to support those tiered medical services that encouraging the patients to go to primary hospitals to see the doctors and then transfer to large hospitals. If they have this digital record that works well, that really facilitate the implementation of this tiered medical system to be implemented in China. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
Mm.
So do we have?
I believe there are quite areas that we can cooperate between China and the Nordic countries in this area. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's such a good idea to go or group together with the Nordic countries, because China is such a big country. So I think the Nordic countries don't need to be competitors, can all share and probably get a better result that way. That's really a good way. So do we have any other questions from the rest of you, or is everything totally clear? Okay, I won't force you, but I think you should take the opportunity at the experts here, and also to Björn if there's something in general. Okay, but if there aren't any questions, then I think we should just say a big thank you to Björn, Joachim, and Judy. Great to have you present today, and thanks a lot for taking your time, and thank you also for the audience for being here with us. So also I wanted to say that we have a third webinar coming up. The date is still not yet set. I hope to know by tomorrow, hopefully, and we will send out the invitation as soon as possible. And I will post the recording of this webinar together with the previous one we had in was it the 6th of April? So I'll post that as soon as it's it just takes some time to edit and upload it, but tomorrow at least it will be there in the SweCare YouTube channel, and you can search for it. Okay, so thank you very much, and hope to see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.